It's actually a very, very special morning tea for us this time, because while it's our pleasure each year to acknowledge the people who have helped the library and supported us, we have a special part of the ceremony this year, which will be the launch of a new catalogue of our Read Bibles collection, and we will look forward to that in a little bit later in the morning. But before I start there, can I please acknowledge the CEO, Mr. Paul Orders, and General Manager of City Strategy and Development, Sue Bidrose, who would like to have been here this morning but unfortunately can't be, and send their apologies. In terms of supporting the library throughout the year, I think it's really important to acknowledge the elected representatives, that's councillors, and we have Councillor Bill Acklin here, Chair of the Community Development Committee today, and other community board representatives who through their governance role support the library throughout the year. So we do rely on and appreciate their support, and all of the executive team. I'd particularly like to acknowledge former General Manager of Community Life, Graham Hall, who has been a tower of strength and support to the library throughout the number of years that Graham has been with Council. I'd like to acknowledge all the library staff, both here in this City Library building and in our community libraries, book buses, and the staff who work behind the scenes, who really provide all the engine room of the library service. And I'd like to also acknowledge the council staff from all the departments. I won't stand here and list them all, but everything from finance to HR to city fleet, city property, and the list goes on. Without their support, clearly the library service wouldn't be able to operate in the way that it does. I'd like to acknowledge the Dunedin Public Library Association, a vibrant and active group within the community, and they help the library in so many ways, with financial support for equipment, for staff training. A beautiful artwork has been donated this year. They assist with the annual book sale, and they're strong community advocates for the library. So, and I know Merle van der Clunden and a number of members of the Friends of the Library Committee are here today, and I publicly acknowledge their support. Throughout the community, we have a large number of writers, poets, illustrators, and by their very work and by their very involvement in the library, they support us. And many people would be aware that we're hatching a very cunning plan for Dunedin to become New Zealand's first UNESCO City of Literature, and without their involvement and all their artistic work, that wouldn't even be possible. So we hope that in the year to come, that may well come to fulfilment. And I acknowledge all the staff, particularly Liz Knowles, who have been involved in working on that proposal and the council support for it. Before I hand over to Councillor Acklin, can I just acknowledge John Gourlay, Sarah Jane Bugden, Catherine Davey and Jean Strawn for the invaluable volunteer work that they've provided to the library throughout the year in various ways. Councillor Bill Acklin. Bill is the chair of the Community Development Committee with Council, and that's the committee to which the library normally reports. And I'd like to publicly acknowledge Bill's support for the library and his involvement in various activities such as today's event. So I'll hand over to Bill to say a few more thank yous, and then Bill will hand back to me at some point. Thanks, Bill.
Can you hear me down the back? Yep. Excellent. Thank you, Bernie. And before I start this huge list of people to thank on behalf of the city and the library, I'd like to say to Bernie that his passion and dedication to the library is something that we all should be very grateful for, and I know staff and friends of the library who work with Bernie on a daily basis would certainly know that. So can we just have a round of applause for Bernie? So this is my second time to this particular Christmas function, and looking around, I think a lot of you have probably been many a time, so I'm sure you are aware of the fact that there are so many supporters of the library in terms of volunteer roles, and it's my pleasure to be the one standing here thanking, and I will start with the volunteer couriers who deliver and return library bags for home services. Your work is greatly appreciated by the library and housebound customers. Bill Noble and staff of the University Bookshop for your support for the Books for Babies program, summer reading program and other partnership activities. University of Otago, in particular Professors Lem McIlvaney, and Angela McCarthy from the Centre for Irish and Scottish Studies, Dr. Donald Kerr, Special Collections Librarian, Dr. Noel Waite, and the Department of Applied Science and Design for Technology staff of the English and History departments. Heather Lane and members of the Alfred and Isabel and Marion Reid Trust in Wellington for ongoing financial support. DunedinMusic.com and Strawberry Sound for their partnership on New Zealand Music Month and other events throughout the year. The Fortune Theatre for the Saucy Readings Partnership. Natural History New Zealand for Film Screen Partnership. Cadbury's for partnership during the Chocolate Festival. Caitlin McMullen for the Once Upon a Sunday and Storytelling Adventures Partnership. Literacy Aotearoa. Otago Polytechnic for the Community Learning Centre Partnership in the Mosgiel Library. Amanda Taylor and Sport Otago for their support for the Wriggle and Rhyme Active Movement Partnership. Gosh, that sounds exciting, doesn't it? Pam, Joan and Tess Livingston from Careers New Zealand in providing career advice programs for teens. Kath Irvine, DCC Waste Strategy Officer for advice and support for library waste minimisation strategies. And Carol Melville and the staff of the Community Trust of Otago for financial support for community projects involving the library. So if we could have a huge round of applause for all of those people. So, as I said, a big list of people that are crucial to the success and the ongoing running of the library. We know that the library costs a lot to run in terms of the rates contribution, but boy, it would be just that much more if we didn't have that sort of support. So thank you all very much, and I'll hand back to Bernie.
Thanks very much, Bill. Now to the special part of our proceedings this morning. Can I invite Mary Ronnie, please, to come forward? I think Mary would be known to most people, but I personally regard Mary as a living legend. Not only was Mary the City Librarian at Dunedin Public Library for many years, she was National Librarian and also Professor of Library Science at Monash University. And Mary has been a long-standing member of the Dunedin community and a huge supporter of the Dunedin Public Library. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Mary. She will launch the Catalogue of Early Bibles, Liturgies and Prayer Books from the Alfred and Isabel Reid collection. Most people would probably be aware that the Reid Bibles collection is one of the largest of its kind in Australasia and is really one of the jewels in the crown of our heritage collections. I'd like to, in terms of the production of this item, I'd like to acknowledge the financial contributions that have come from royalties from Mary's book, from Freedom to Read, a very generous and rich offering to this new catalogue that's been produced. Funding has also been received from the Alfred, Isabel and Marion Reid Trust in Wellington, Alexander Macmillan Trust and the Dunedin Public Libraries Association. And without their financial support, this catalogue just would not have been produced. So I sincerely and wholeheartedly acknowledge them. So I'll hand over to Mary.
Thanks, Bernie. Well, thank you, Bernie, for those kind remarks. I must say that it's been both a pleasure and a relief to see what this looks like, because I've always felt that the previous catalogue was just ghastly. One isn't allowed to say this something too loudly, but it was awful. And this is truly beautiful. There it is, and really lovely, and Anthony must feel very proud of it indeed. But we should look back a bit about it, because it really started with A.H. Reid back in 1907, when he got the bug of collecting by getting a Beza Bible, which turned out to be not very expensive. He didn't have very much money at the time, but that was the beginning of it all. And from there on, he set about doing his target thing of collecting the English Bible. And for nearly 70 years he was buying material. I mean, we were extraordinarily lucky that he lived so long because he had all sorts of fights with the government about gift duties. And when he was 70, they tried to tell him that he would have to pay tax if he didn't live more than 5 years. And after living another 20 years, he laughed at them, which was very nice for all of us. And he also knew what he wanted. He was wanting the significant editions of the English Bible. And you look at the treasure of the Wycliffe Purvey Gospels and you realise that he started before print. And he also wanted any religious text which preceded it, and he included later Maori versions. I've never quite been able to understand, and perhaps Peter Matheson could explain this, why the Book of Job was such a favourite. But I always felt it was a rather gloomy thing to have been wanting to translate, but perhaps that's what the missionaries felt, a bit of gloom. He wanted everybody in New Zealand to have access to these things, and that was one of the reasons why I bought them. And one of his really prime examples of giving access was when the young Christopher de Hamel, who later became very notable and in fact is still notable, at 12 years old was in love with all things early and old, and A.H. set him down at a table in the library and let him handle the early manuscripts. And I think that was an infection for Chris too. He got a bug then, just like A.H. had with the Bezer Bible. He would have enjoyed seeing this. He would have loved this edition, though he had a sort of economy when it came to the printed word. And if anybody looks back on the sort of books in Dunedin of his time, from the budget print in Bath Street, I don't know how many of you remember the budget print in Bath Street, but I sort of had to do the checking of all the printing things. I got to know it very vividly, and you practically needed a magnifying glass if you did it too often. But however, here we are with this wonderful thing, and I think we can be proud of the people who contributed to it so much, but also remember the person who did the first collection. I may say that there were academics around Dunedin who didn't really believe that A.H. knew what he was doing, but I assure you, A.H. knew exactly what he was doing, and we should be very, very thankful indeed. So it's an enormous pleasure for me and an honour, and thank you, Ronnie, to let me launch this book, because I've sort of nagged about it, as Anthony would be aware, over the years, particularly when I was working those 3 years on the book in the library, and I kept looking at the awful thing that we had produced and thought, we can't go on with that. But here is this, which is a great cooperative effort. People like Peter Matheson have contributed to it. Anthony, of course, has organised it. And Anthony, of course, got onto very good terms with its editor, Brian McMullen, who's an old mate of mine from Monash days, but he has the gimlet eye of the best editor you can imagine. And both Anthony and I were aware that when one took a text to Brian, there would be a certain amount of red ink on it on the way back, right? And there usually was. And I was privileged, in fact, to carry to Melbourne that sort of a final version for Brian to edit. And I must say that it was a nice occasion when I gave it to him, because we were having a party. And I am a great believer in parties, and I think this one should carry on now. And here's the book. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mary. Mary's already acknowledged some of the people who've been involved in the production of the book, but let me also acknowledge Casey Thomas, who's done the graphic design work, a really great job. And also Dr. Donald Kerr, John Timmins and Jill Haley, who provided summaries of the biblical and liturgical collections from the University of Otago Special Collections, the Hewitson Library, and also the Otago Settlers Museum. Copies of the catalogue are available for sale after this function, just outside this door. So we've got copies if anyone would like to purchase them. They're $35. If you would like to pay cash, we can handle that up here, or if you only want to pay by FPOS, we can do that on the ground floor of the library. So if you'd like to obtain a copy today, that's very possible. So thank you very much, Mary, and congratulations to everyone involved in the launch of this absolutely beautiful this collection. It's now my pleasure to hand back to Councillor Bill Acklin to announce the 2011 recipients of the Library Citation. This is a special award that we give a lot of consideration to, and often we have a number of nominees for this honour, which is recognising people throughout the community who have made a significant contribution to the library in one way or another. So I'll hand over to Councillor Acklin.
Thanks, Bernie. Before I tell you all the details with regards to the recipients, I'll firstly say that this year there are two, and I'm going to ask them to come up here to join us before giving you the details as to why they are the library citation recipients this year. And in fact, in a way, it's quite special for me as well, and I'll tell you that in a moment. But, the recipients for this year's library citation: Jennifer June Hodgkinson and Jill Beverly Hugh. Can you please give them?
What have we done?
Right. You said, what have you done? I'm about to tell you what you've done. Obviously it was a surprise, wasn't it? Jenny and Jill, in partnership with the Dunedin Public Libraries, have organised and run a monthly book club for the residents of Frances Hodgkins Retirement Village since 2003. This is a fantastic service which is highly valued by residents at the rest home, their staff and the library staff alike. Jenny and Jill's commitment to lifelong learning and enriching the lives of elderly people in society deserves to be acknowledged and celebrated. Now the other thing about I know is Mrs. Hodgkinson, because she was my school teacher.
I actually taught him music.
Music?
And with Jill Dunwoody was your teacher, wasn't she? Dead Jill.
She was for 1 year.
That's right.
There we go.